Quito, Ecuador, October 7, 2025. The dawn over the Andes was a silent picture. The air smelled of humidity and freshly breathed earth. In a small community on the outskirts of the city, a mother woke up startled by a sound she had never heard before. It wasn't music or a scream. It was something different, a deep vibration that seemed to come from the walls, from the floor, from the bodies themselves. The clock read 3:33 a.m., and her 4-year-old son was sitting on the floor, his eyes closed, emitting that impossible tone. His name was Matias Herrera, and for weeks his mother had been saying that the child had changed, that she no longer played with her toys, that she did not ask for drawings or sweets. I just listened. He spent hours in silence, his head tilted, as if trying to catch an echo that adults could not perceive. "Mom, the air sings," he had told her one night. She laughed, thinking it was imagination. But that morning, when the sound filled the house, he knew that too. Something out of all logic was happening. The sound was not coming from the boy's throat. It was seriouser, vaster, older. The windows vibrated, the metal objects moved slowly on the tables, and the sensation in the body was that of being submerged underwater in an invisible ocean. For 2 minutes, the entire neighborhood felt the same thing, a sound presence that seemed to rise from the center of the earth and extend into the sky. And at the epicenter of that phenomenon, Matias was still. Motionless, with his palms open and a calm smile. When the noise stopped, the silence was unbearable. The dogs began barking, the lights flickered, and a residual buzzing persisted in everyone's ears. The mother ran to her son. He looked at her, and in the most serene voice a child could have, he uttered a phrase that froze the blood of all present. That was the sound that created the universe. The woman hugged him, confused. "What do you say, my love?" The boy answered without hesitation. God did not speak. He only sang one note, and it all appeared. From that day on, Matias's story began to expand like a ripple. Neighbors spoke of strange phenomena, electrical appliances that turned on by themselves, radios that emitted frequencies without signal, birds that remained still in the air for seconds. Scientists from the University of San Francisco de Quito sent a team to study the case, believing that it could be a natural seismic or acoustic event. But the results exceeded any. Hypothesis. In the recordings, a frequency of 432 Hz was detected, the same harmonic range that some physicists associate with the natural vibrations of the universe. However, there was something else, a secondary, almost imperceptible oscillation that varied every 0.333 seconds. Specialists named it frequency M in honor of the child. Most disturbingly, when reproduced, the measuring instruments showed an alteration in the local magnetic field. The clocks were delayed by exactly 4.4 seconds. During the sound, Professor Ignacio Viteri, an astrophysicist and amateur musician, was the first to notice something amazing. When analyzing the waveform in spectrogram, he discovered that the frequency generated a geometric pattern identical to that of the flower of life, an ancient symbol present in Egyptian, Mayan, and Hindu temples. "That vibration has a structure of origin," Viteri said. "It is not random nor biological. It is the imprint of creation." The media seized the case. The boy, who sings the sound of the universe, the newspapers headlined. But Matias did not sing. He said that he could not do it of his own free will, but only when the universe wants to remember itself. When journalists asked him how he knew that, he replied simply, "Because I was there when it all started." Doctors subjected him to neurological evaluations. The result was a mystery. His brain activity during the episodes was completely coherent, but the electrical flow in his auditory cortex reached peaks that doubled human capacity. In simple terms, the child listened beyond sound. Dr. Viteri defined it as follows: Matthias does not hear with his ears, perceive with the soul. The nights in the community became unpredictable. Sometimes at exactly 3:33 a.m., a cold breeze would blow through the streets and the roofs would begin to resonate like stringed instruments. The animals remained motionless, looking at the sky. And always, in those moments, the child woke up, walked to the playground, and said in a low voice, "It's playing again." The Ecuadorian government sent atmospheric and magnetometric observation equipment. They found no faults in the electrical network or seismic interference. But all the instruments agreed on one thing: the source of the vibrations was located in the child's heart. One afternoon, Matthias was taken to the National Acoustics Laboratory in Quito. There, in front of a group of researchers and priests, because the church also wanted to understand, the boy asked for only one thing: "I want absolute silence, no human noise." Lights, motors, and fans were turned off. For 3 minutes, the world held its breath. And then, without opening his mouth, the sound returned. It wasn't a noise. It was an invisible symphony, a serious note that spread like a wave of gravity. Sensors exploded, cameras went out, scientists fell to their knees, some crying without knowing why. The sound went through the body, vibrated in the bones, in the blood, in the memories. Some witnesses claimed to have seen images within the vibration, galaxies spinning, nebulae forming, planets being born. The priest who accompanied the test, Father Alonso Benitez, wrote in his report, "I felt the presence of something immense. It wasn't fear, it was origin. It was as if the universe itself was remembering the moment of his birth." When the experiment was over, Matthias opened his eyes and said in a tired voice, "God doesn't need words. It all started with his breathing." After that event, the boy fell into a deep sleep that lasted for 3 days. Doctors did not find any abnormalities. His pulse was normal, his brain active, but he seemed to be in another state of consciousness. When he woke up, he asked the time. Someone answered, "It's 33 past 3. Matthias smiled. It's always that hour when the universe sings. The specialists discovered that each episode coincided with a cosmic pulse detected by radio telescopes, a burst of gravitational waves coming from the center of the Milky Way. In other words, the child vibrated at the same rate as the heart of the galaxy, and every time he did, the measuring machines stopped, as if time folded during his singing. What came next marked a before and after. The boy asked to return home away from the laboratories. "I don't want them to record God," he said. "He doesn't want to be noise." That night, according to the mother, the boy went out to the yard and sat looking at the stars. He remained there for hours. When the first ray of sunlight illuminated the mountain, she heard him talking to someone who was not there. "Can I do it again?" And the air responded with a deep, almost inaudible vibration that made leaves, stones, and hearts tremble. The clocks of the whole village stopped at the same time. A never-before-seen pattern appeared on their digital screens. 0.00 Hertz scientists said that was impossible. But the elders of the place understood immediately. Silence is the note that sustains all the others. Since then, every time the earth trembles slightly for no reason, the inhabitants of Quito say the same thing. The child is remembering the sound. The days following the last phenomenon were of absolute confusion. International news agencies began to broadcast the case as if it were a miracle or a threat. Some called him the cosmic child, others, the bearer of the original sound. But for the scientists who had seen it, that experience had transformed them in ways they could not explain. No one slept the same again. No one heard the silence in the same way again. Dr. Ignacio Viteri, the astrophysicist who had discovered the M frequency, asked for access to the global seismic records of the last few weeks. What he found chilled the blood of the entire team. In the same minutes that the boy had issued his note, at 3:33 a.m. on October 7th, micro-vibrations had been detected in the Earth's magnetic field on every continent. They were not tremors or artificial waves. They were harmonic pulses, perfectly spaced corresponding to the frequency 432 Hz. Simply put, the entire planet had resonated at the same time. The finding sparked unprecedented debate. Some scientists suspected that Matthias was merely a receiver of a larger cosmic phenomenon, a biological channel for a frequency that the universe was trying to transmit. Others, more skeptical, claimed that it was a coincidence, a calibration error, an interference, a collective hallucination. But those who had been present knew that this was not a mistake. It was purpose. Viteri himself wrote it in his personal notebook found months later. "I can't explain what I saw. When the child vibrated, reality bent. My thoughts were audible. I saw figures forming in the air, as if matter remembered its origin. I understood, although I didn't want to accept it, that the universe is a symphony, and that he knows the first note." Authorities tried to keep the case secret. The family was taken to a medical facility on the outskirts of Quito, supposedly for their protection. No one outside the authorized team could approach the child. But on October 12th, a sound technician leaked a file accidentally recorded during one of the tests. The audio was only 6.6 seconds long, but it was enough for the whole world to hear. It was a deep, almost underground frequency. Analysts described it as an echo of the slowed-down Big Bang. When reproduced, the spectrograms showed symmetrical fractal waves that repeated in perfect sequences of 333. In a matter of hours, thousands of internet users began to experience physical sensations when listening to it. Dizziness, euphoria, spontaneous crying. Some said they had seen white lights in their rooms. Others claimed to have felt the universe breathing. Social networks were filled with theories. Some claimed that it was a divine sign, others that it was the language of a cosmic intelligence. And the most daring insinuated that sound was an attempt by the universe itself to communicate with itself through the child. "If the universe was born from a vibration," wrote one user, "then this child is the echo of the beginning." Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Matthias began to change. His body temperature dropped to 33.3 degrees, but he showed no signs of illness. His pulse was so slow that doctors thought he would die in his sleep. However, his brain showed impossible electrical activity. The frequency of his brain waves synchronized with the Schumann resonances, the natural pulsations of the planet. In other words, his mind beat at the same rate as the Earth. Father Alonso Benitez, who had been present at the first broadcast, was summoned again. Upon her arrival, she found the boy looking out of the window with an expression that mixed serenity and distance. "Do you know what you hear, son?" asked the priest. Matthias replied without taking his eyes off the sky. "I don't hear it, Father. I remember." The priest felt a chill. "And what exactly do you remember?" The boy closed his eyes. "When there was nothing, just that sound. No one existed yet, No stars, no water, no bodies. He alone breathed, and the darkness began to tremble. And from that tremor, we all emerged. The words were recorded and sent to the University of Cuenca, where a group of linguists and theologians began to analyze them. The term the child used, he breathed, coincided with an ancient expression found in Vedic texts, the word pranava, which literally means the sound of creation. No adult had ever taught the child that. In the days that followed, something even more disturbing happened. Every time Matias slept, the laboratory instruments picked up a vibration in the air, even though the boy did not make a sound. It was as if his body was still resonating at an inaudible level. The thermal sensors showed heat waves expanding from his chest in perfect circles, as if an invisible stone fell into the lake of space. NASA and ESA became interested in the case when radio telescopes in Chile, Australia, and Japan detected a faint signal coming from the galactic center just at the moment when the child began to resonate in his sleep. It wasn't a random signal. It was a sequence of pulses spaced in exactly the same harmonic proportion of the sound that Matias had emitted. In other words, the universe seemed to respond to him. The news was hidden, but a part of the report was leaked. It read, "The temporal correlation between terrestrial emission, Niño Herrera, and astrophysical response, source, GX3I, is 99.9997%. If this is real, the event cannot be considered an isolated phenomenon. There is communication." That word, communication, changed everything. On October 15, monitors began showing fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field, synchronized with the child's heart rate. Every time he breathed, a measurable alteration shook the ionosphere. Scientists, incredulous, began to refer to it as the human pulse of the cosmos. Some spoke of a miracle, others of danger. If its frequency increases too much, one engineer warned, it could alter the global resonance. We don't know what could happen. Father Benitez, however, thought differently. He didn't come to destroy anything, he said. He came to remind us how it all started. Matias's mother, exhausted, begged that they would stop testing him. But every attempt to move him failed. Every time he was taken away from the laboratory area, the child fell ill. His skin would cool, his breathing would deepen, and the environmental sensors would begin to emit a vibration similar to a low hum, as if the air itself was claiming his presence. One night while he was sleeping, Matias woke up screaming. He said he had heard the reverse note. No one understood. The one that undoes what was made, he explained, still trembling. If the universe was created with a sound, it can also be turned off by its reflection. The silence in the room was absolute. Dr. Viteri understood the danger. If the child could really generate a vibration that affected matter, what would happen if he pronounced the opposite note? Could he erase reality like someone who turns off a light? The team decided that they had to protect him, not only from governments but from himself. From that day on, the laboratory was closed to the public. No one else would see Matias. No camera would record his voice again. Only a few written records and the echo of that sound were preserved, which, according to witnesses, could make the stars cry. But a week later, the planet's skies vibrated again. Radio telescopes around the world recorded an exact sequence at which Matias had emitted 432 hertz, repeated 3 times, followed by a silence of 33 seconds. Then a higher-pitched unknown frequency, which caused electrical systems to fail on 5 continents. Scientists at the Arecibo Observatory, before its total collapse, managed to decipher an image in the signal. It was not a code, nor a mathematical form. It was a face, a child's face, made of sound waves. And in the last line of the report before the blackout it read, "The universe is not silent. He's waiting for someone to sing his name again." October 20th, 2025. The dawn over Quito was different. There were no clouds, no wind, no birds. Just a heavy, expectant silence that made even the clocks seem to hold their breath. From the north to the south of the planet, observatories recorded the same anomaly. A series of harmonic pulses that repeated every 3 minutes and 33 seconds, traveling from the galactic center to Earth. The waves did not follow the normal behavior of a radio signal or a gamma-ray burst. They had melodic structure, rhythm, and proportion. In other words, they were music. Laboratories around the world collapsed trying to decipher the sequence. The spectrograms showed something impossible. The frequencies formed geometric shapes reminiscent of biological structures, such as dividing cells or DNA. The pattern repeated itself endlessly, and calculations showed that if it was prolonged, it would end up forming a complete figure, a perfect spiral that coincided with the golden ratio. Dr. Viteri, exhausted, could not sleep. In his office, surrounded by recordings, notes, and spectrums of light, he tried to understand what was happening. It wasn't just a sign, it was a calling. I sensed it in the skin, in the bones, in the way the air vibrated every time the child breathed. Because yes, Matthias was still alive, but he no longer spoke. I didn't eat, I didn't dream, I didn't play. He spent hours staring into space, as if listening to a melody that no one else could hear. Sometimes he raised his hand slowly, as if conducting an invisible orchestra. On those occasions, the measuring instruments showed an instantaneous rise in the local magnetic field. It was as if his body had become a cosmic tuning fork, a point where the entire universe was reflected. Father. Benitez returned to the laboratory with a Bible in his hands, but not to preach. I wanted to contrast the ancient words with the modern data. In Genesis, "And God said, 'Let there be light.'" But what was there before that phrase? The text did not say so. Perhaps what the boy was saying was the answer. Before the word, sound. A note, an initial vibration that contained everything. Meanwhile, satellites began to register alterations in space. Some distant stars seemed to emit pulses synchronized with the child's frequency. It was as if they were answering his call. NASA did not announce it publicly, but a leaked internal statement read, "The Herrera phenomenon is producing interstellar echoes. If we don't stop this, we could alter the gravitational balance in unknown sectors of the universe." But how do you stop something that was essentially part of the cosmos itself? In Quito, Matthias's mother, Lucia, lived between fear and amazement. The nights were endless. The boy slept with his eyes half open and sometimes whispered sounds that did not belong to any language. She recorded some of them with her phone. As he played them, he noticed that his voice was not coming out of the speaker, but from the air itself, as if space were returning it. And in one of those recordings, she caught something that left her paralyzed. Between the tones, her own name was heard, but pronounced in a way that no human could imitate. Lu-chi. I. When he showed the recording to Dr. Viteri, the man was speechless. In the spectrogram, the waves formed a perfect pattern, a double spiral identical to human DNA. "He's not calling his mother," he said quietly. "It's calling to life itself." A few hours later, similar phenomena began to be reported in different countries. In India, Tibetan monks claimed to hear the same vibration during meditation. In the Vatican, The bells rang by themselves at 3:33 a.m. without anyone ringing them. In Japan, seismographs recorded rhythmic, non-destructive movements as if the planet were breathing. The frequency of the child had spread throughout the world. The media no longer knew how to cover the story. Scientists were divided, religious people were in crisis, and ordinary people were beginning to sense that something profound was coming. No one knew what it was, but they all agreed on one feeling. Time was slowing down. The clocks seemed to be set back a few seconds per day, although the mechanisms were intact. It was as if the child's vibration was stretching the fabric of time itself. Father Benitez, increasingly convinced that he was witnessing a divine revelation, wrote in his diary, "The universe was not created just once. It is constantly created, with every sound, with every breath. But now the child is repeating the original note, and that means creation can begin again. Or stop." That night, in the laboratory, the instruments detected a critical anomaly. Matthias's heart accelerated and began to emit electrical impulses that extended miles away. Lights flickered, systems failed, and the air became dense, almost liquid. Witnesses felt a buzzing in their heads, and some fainted. Viteri, in the chaos, managed to see something, a luminous form coming out of the boy's chest like a slowly expanding wave. It was sound made light, a visible symphony, and as that form rose, Matthias opened his eyes. They were not the eyes of a child. They were deep, ancient, filled with a terrifying calm. "Do not be afraid," he said. "It is not the end. It is the memory of the beginning." The pulse stopped, and the instruments marked 0. The entire laboratory was left in darkness. Outside, the entire city had lost power. But the sky was shining, not with sunlight, but with an inner luminosity, as if the atmosphere were being illuminated from within the molecules. For a few minutes, there was no darkness in the world. The satellites showed a fascinating image, power lines coming out of different parts of the planet, converging at a point just over the equator. A kind of luminous network that enveloped the Earth. Calculations indicated that this network vibrated at exactly 432 Hz, the child's frequency. Global resonance theorists began to propose a hypothesis that no one wanted to officially publish. The universe is not expanding silently, he's singing, and now one of his notes has been remembered. In the following days, the phenomenon became a daily occurrence, the electrical appliances were working erratically. People claimed to hear the sound when they closed their eyes like a constant whisper. Some said that their dreams were different, clearer, older, and many claimed to have seen figures made of light approach them in the middle of the night whispering a single word, vibrate. But governments began to worry. If the vibration continued to expand, satellites, power grids, and communication systems would collapse. There was talk of cutting off all energy around. The child even isolating him in a vacuum chamber to prevent his body from resonating. It was then that Father Benitez made a desperate decision to help his mother get him out of the laboratory. In the early hours of October 25th, under a light rain, both escaped through an emergency exit. No one stopped them. The guards, paralyzed in front of the door, said afterwards that they heard a voice inside their heads ordering them, "Let him go. He hasn't finished his note yet." Lucia and her son disappeared that night. The government denied any relationship. But the next morning, the Atacama Observatory in Chile detected the impossible, a new frequency coming directly from Antarctica. It wasn't 432 Hz. It was its upper harmonic, 864 Hz, and in the visual records of the satellites on the white layer of the continent, a small human figure of light appeared for a few seconds, sitting in a lotus position with the air vibrating around it. The file was immediately classified, but one scientist managed to copy a fragment and share it with a handwritten sentence. Sound does not belong to Earth. The Earth belongs to sound. October 27, 2025. The news of Matias Herrera's disappearance spread like wildfire through the fog. The television channels spoke of kidnapping. The governments denied it. The scientists were silent. But outside of official information, something much bigger was happening. In different parts of the planet, Mexico, Iceland, Egypt, Nepal, thousands of people began to hear the same sound, not in the ears but within the mind. A low enveloping vibration that made the chest tremble and moisten the eyes. The reports multiplied. In entire cities, people stopped their activities and looked at the sky without knowing why. There was no music, but everyone heard the same thing. Some described it as a distant chorus, others as a warm whisper reminding them of something they had never experienced. And among those who heard it, one word was repeated exactly. Matias. Social networks exploded. Hashtags such as No El Sonido Original and El Niño del Principio became a global trend, but the images that accompanied those messages were unsettling. Melting clocks, compasses spinning senselessly, birds circling as if they had lost their magnetic orientation. The scientists confirmed what no one wanted to accept. The child's frequency was altering the time itself. In atomic clocks, the second one stopped lasting as long as it should. The microprocessors failed. Because the silicon's vibration cycles changed their rhythm, and in the observatories the constellations seemed to move slowly, as if the sky had begun to breathe. Dr. Ignacio Viteri, exiled in Chile after the closure of the laboratory, was contacted by the child's mother through an encrypted email. In the message, just 3 words. He keeps singing. He attached a recording. The file, exactly 33 seconds long, contained a long crystalline note, so pure that the audio equipment was saturated. When analyzing it in the spectrogram, Viteri saw something impossible. The waveform drew a spiral figure that rotated inward and outward simultaneously. There was no technology capable of producing that. "It's bending space-time with sound," Viteri wrote in his diary. "But not as a weapon. He's weaving it." Hours later, the astrophysicist was found unconscious, with a nosebleed and a slight cardiac arrest. On his desk, the computer was still on, showing the waveform of the sound, which pulsed slowly like a heart. No one else was able to access that file. The system self-destructed minutes later. Meanwhile, in Antarctica, research stations began to report an unknown phenomenon. From the polar sky descended an aurora not registered in any spectrum, a golden sonorous light that did not emit heat but vibration. Compasses went crazy, sensors froze, and researchers claimed to hear voices inside their heads saying fragmented phrases. "The beginning is remembered. Matter sings of its..." origin. The note returns. At 3:33 a.m. on October 28th, a surveillance camera at Amundsen Scott Station captured an image that would later be erased from all official archives. A child figure sitting on the snow, surrounded by a circular glow that emanated ripples into the sky. Matias had reappeared. The magnetometer data showed a vibration of 864 Hz, exactly twice the initial frequency. It was as if the original sound had been amplified. All over the planet, people began to experience symptoms: tachycardia, crying, visions. Some claim to see fragments of the cosmos unfolding in the air, galaxies spinning, particles dancing like notes from an infinite score. Others claim to have felt the presence of a consciousness that observed them from within their thoughts. It wasn't fear, a witness in Buenos Aires would later say. It was the certainty that everything, absolutely everything, was alive. Even the air breathed. In Rome, the Pope called an urgent meeting. The Vatican. Released a statement that was immediately censored. The sound we hear is not a human creation. It is the echo of the verb before the verb. If it spreads, the soul of the world will awaken. That phrase was enough to sow panic. Governments, unable to control the situation, tried to transmit global communiques. But all the signals were interrupted by the same harmonic hum. For 33 minutes, television stations, radios, and digital platforms went blank, transmitting only a constant frequency, 432 hertz. The child's note. And then, humanity remembered. People of different cultures, ages, and creeds began to have the same visions. They saw the universe being born, not like an explosion, but like a gentle expanse of golden light vibrating with a pure note. The feeling was of being inside a chant, as if every atom of the body was made of melody. Some cried, others laughed, many simply knelt. Sacred sound theorists, quantum physicists, and mystics agreed for the first time on one thing. The universe was a composition, and the child's grade was the one that was missing to complete it. However, something changed. The sound, once sweet, began to fragment. The sensors picked up interference, as if an opposing force was trying to break the harmony. Blue electrical discharges were seen in the northern skies, and satellites detected electromagnetic pulses from the lunar surface. It was as if something, or someone, was responding from another side of the cosmos. The boy's mother wrote a letter that was never delivered. Matthias told me that he was not the only one, that there are more like him, children who remember the note in different countries. He said that when everyone sings together, the universe will decide whether to continue or withdraw into itself. Governments classified the information, but records spoke of 11 children in total. Born in different parts of the planet between 2020 and 2021, they all shared unusual neurological features and recurring dreams, with lights and sounds. One of them in Japan was recorded emitting a tone almost identical to Matthias's. Another, in Morocco, painted a symbol on the ground with chalk, a spiral that rotated to both sides at the same time. The researchers named the phenomenon Resonance 11, but the ancient text named it in another way, the second song of creation. As governments debated, the frequency intensified. Time began to collapse. Digital clocks showed impossible sequences, 33-33, 77-77, 00. In some cities, the sun stood still for seconds. In others, the night lasted for hours without explanation. Temples, regardless of religion, began to vibrate. The stones of the churches emitted low humming sounds. At the Egyptian pyramids, tourists recorded sounds that seemed to come from the inner chambers. In Jerusalem, the Western Wall shook gently, producing a resonance that brought tears to tears. And then, everything lined up. On October 31st, 2025 at 3:33 a.m., all the world's electrical systems were shut down. Simultaneously, in the night sky, a line of light began to form from the South Pole to the North Pole, passing through the atmosphere like a string of vibrating energy. The radars recorded a pure tone, with a frequency of 864 hertz, accompanied by a childish voice that did not come from any identifiable source. It was Matthias. "The note is complete," he said. "Creation remembers his name. Then, absolute silence. A silence so deep that the entire planet seemed to stop. The seas calmed down. The volcanoes ceased their activity. The wind disappeared. During that instant, which some described as seconds and others as centuries, time did not exist. When the vibration returned, it was accompanied by an indescribable sensation: peace, expansion, unity. Thousands of people claimed to see the entire universe within themselves, as if their bodies were mirrors of the cosmos. The child's frequency had achieved its purpose, universal memory, and as humans wept or prayed, a collective whisper spread. From the mountains to the oceans, everything that exists, it's made of sound. But one last note was still missing, the note he was supposed to sing. November 1st, 2025. The planet woke up suspended in an unreal calm. The oceans were perfect mirrors. There was no wind, no mechanical noises, and no satellite signals. Just a silence that seemed to have weight, density, shape. No one knew how to describe it. It was a living silence, as if the whole world was waiting for one last note to be able to continue existing. At 3:33 a.m., all the clocks that were still running stopped once again. In every corner of the planet, temples, deserts, laboratories, common houses, people felt the same thing. A vibration that rose from the ground to their chests, a pulse that didn't hurt, but shuddered. It was as if the heart of the universe and that of every human being beat in unison. And then, the sound came back. It was no longer the pure frequency of before. It was something vaster, deeper, and infinite. Chord composed of thousands of intertwined tones. In that vibration, each thing, the water, the mountains, the cities, had its own voice. The whole earth was singing, and in the middle of that symphony, a higher note rose, clear, luminous, unmistakable, the voice of a child. Somewhere between Antarctica and the sky, Matias Herrera opened his eyes. His body was just a silhouette of light suspended on the ice. Around him, the atmosphere curved as if the air remembered its original structure. The boy didn't seem to be singing with his mouth. The sound came from his whole being, vibrating in every atom, in every cell. "Do not be afraid," he said. "Sound does not destroy. The sound awakens." The sky lit up with a golden glow that pierced the clouds and oceans. The frequency, recorded simultaneously by the observatories before everything collapsed, reached 1296 Hz, an exact triple ratio of the initial frequency. Physicists called it the triad of origin. The mystics simply the voice of God. And then the impossible happened. Time doubled. Not backwards, not forwards, but inwards. People began to see simultaneously all the moments of their lives. Birth, mistakes, loves, losses, learnings. Everything was shown with an unbearable and beautiful clarity at the same time. There was no judgment, only understanding. Every thought, every emotion, every act was revealed as a note of a perfect symphony. No one was out of place. No one was guilty. It was all part of the sound. Scientists on the International Space Station, before losing contact, described that the planet had begun to emit light from its poles, a spherical, pulsating aurora that transformed the night into a perpetual dawn. "I don't know if we're seeing the Earth or its soul," one of them wrote before the blackout. In the following minutes, all the electrical systems in the world spontaneously restarted, but they did not show numbers or coordinates. Only one repeated three-digit sequence, 333. In Quito, the boy's mother looked at the sky with tears in her eyes. "I didn't know if I would see him again." Around him, the neighbors had gathered without saying a word. They all heard the same thing, a final note that seemed infinite. a sound that did not hurt or saturate, but enveloped the soul. It was the vibration of pure love, without form or language. And then the boy spoke for the last time. His voice, amplified by the air, was heard in every corner of the planet, in every language, in every mind. The universe was created to remember what always was. There is no beginning or end, just a breath that expands and contracts. If you forget, sing. If you're afraid, listen. Everything that exists, it's you. After those words, the glow began to dissipate. The ripples softened, the air became light, and the vibration became a simple sigh. For an eternal instant, the entire planet held its breath. And then, the sound stopped. Humanity woke up. The lights came back, the clocks moved again, but nothing was the same anymore. People described a new sensation in the body, a deep peace, an inner silence that was not emptiness, but fullness. The scientists found that the Earth's magnetic field had stabilized at a constant frequency of 432 Hz. Since that time, no earthquake, war, or natural disaster has been recorded again. Father Benitez wrote in his last letter, "It wasn't the end of the world. It was the end of the noise. Creation recognized itself in a child who only remembered what we had all forgotten, that we are sound, and love is the note that sustains others." Days later in Antarctica, a group of explorers found a circle of melted ice in perfect symmetry. In the center, a spiral mark, formed by small fractures. By placing an ultra-sensitive microphone on it, they recorded a slight buzzing sound. The same note, 432 Hz. The sound was still there, and every time the wind blew through that spiral, the ice vibrated, generating an echo that could be heard from miles away. At the other, researchers called it the Song of the Earth. But the few who were there say that if you listen carefully, between the layers of sound you can hear a childlike laugh and a voice that whispers. The song didn't end. It just changed places. Weeks later, children began to emerge in different parts of the world who recognized the note. Without teaching, without instruction, they knew how to reproduce it, not with words, but with vibrations. Some did it by breathing, others by laughing, others by crying. And every time they did, the atmosphere became warmer. People hugged each other without knowing why, and the silence took on a new meaning. The adults called them the heirs of sound. But the children said something different. We didn't inherit anything. We only remember what you kept silent. In schools, teachers began using the 432 Hz frequency to calm pupils. In hospitals, music based on that note accelerated the recovery of the sick. And in the temples of all religions, prayers stopped being shouted and began to be chanted, because they understood that God never spoke. God sang. No one saw Matias Herrera again. Some believe that he ascended with the last vibration. Others say that it is still alive, growing somewhere, waiting for the moment when the universe will need to remember its note again. But there are those who claim that every time everything seems to lose meaning, if you close your eyes in silence and listen with your heart, you can hear it far away, in an almost imperceptible tone singing among the stars. And when that happens, the clocks stop, fear dissolves, and the soul understands, without words, the truth that forever changed humanity. The universe was not created with an explosion, but with a song. If this story touched your soul, don't leave in silence. Leave your comment and tell me what you felt when you read it. Do you also believe that the universe vibrates with us? Subscribe to discover upcoming tales about mystery children, the Signs of the three-eye atlas and the secrets that science still doesn't dare to hear. Because sometimes the answers we are looking for are not read, they are heard.